Hello and welcome to Frugal Noodle, the podcast dedicated to helping you understand how you can retire. Because in this world, a lot of us young folk, millennials and younger, don't know what it takes to retire, don't understand how long of a road it really is, and how short you can make it just by dedicating a little more energy to it. This is Cody, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the math behind retirement and a lot of the questions that people have when it comes to retirement. Now, as a disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor, and this should not be perceived as financial advice. I am on this path myself, and I am educating as I am learning myself. So, with all the math that goes into retirement, and all the time it takes to retire, a lot of people don't understand some of the simpler aspects to retirement. And if they don't understand that, then they don't understand the more complex aspects to retirement. Questions like, okay, it's my money, but where does it come from when I'm actually pulling from it? And how do you know you've contributed enough for the remainder of your life? And what about how do you calculate how much you need for retirement? And also, what is that 4% rule that I've heard about? Or maybe you haven't even heard about that. Well, first, let's address the fact that it is your money, but a lot of people don't know where it actually comes from. So simply put, from the present, or if you're retired, from the past, you are the contributor to your retirement. So right now, you are contributing to your future self. You in 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, next year. Every contribution you make in the present is to you in the future. If you're already retired, then thank yourself from 20 years ago or whenever you started this journey, because it was you. But it's not as simple as that. It's not like you contributed $2 million and now you're living off of $2 million. You contributed to 401ks, IRAs, and other investment accounts. And those don't just sit there. It's not like a savings account where you gain like 0.05 interest or whatever it is. What those accounts do is they sit in a brokerage, which is basically a word for saying a group that manages your money, takes that money and invests it in different parts of the stock market or different sectors of other financial growth opportunities. For instance, maybe real estate. It's not exactly a stock, but your money might invest into an ETF that represents real estate as a whole. When your money is invested into these accounts, it grows because it is being contributed to perhaps a sector of the stock market. And that sector of the stock market is composed of maybe 20, hundreds, whatever stocks. Sometimes it's similar to like the S&P 500, which represents the 500 best performing stocks. As an example of my own, we invest into the index funds found on Vanguard, which are essentially just a conglomerate of a sector of the stock market. And when the businesses that compose those stock symbols improve and grow, and their stock improves and grows, then as a whole, we gain money from our money being invested in that sector. And that's why it's diversified when you invest in an index fund. You're going to have winners and losers within each one. That will grow, and sometimes it'll lose, but it'll average out. And typically, you can expect between 5 and 7% growth every year. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But that's why you diversify as a whole. Your 401k, your IRA, you can have dedicated to many different sectors. And then your own investment accounts that you manage, but you do through a broker, will be better off if you diversify among different index funds and ETFs. An ETF is an exchange traded fund. So it's essentially what I described as an index fund. Kind of interchangeable, but they're a little bit different from each other in a few different ways, which I'll explain down the road. The accounts, as you contribute to them and as they grow on their own, obviously will grow further. There are things like exponential growth that help explain this, where if you invested $1 and at the end of the year it only improved by 7 cents, then it's $1.07 at the end of the year. But if you invested $1 million and it improved by 7%, then it's going to go up $70,000. So the more you contribute, the faster it grows on its own because it has a larger amount of money to grow from. And the money that you're actually withdrawing from when you retire isn't actually the original money you invested. And if that doesn't make sense, for example, if you are going to survive off of $40,000 a year, you would want to save $1 million because 4% of 1 million is 40,000, which is where that 4% rule comes from. And we'll explain that a little more in a minute. So if you're growing at the average of 7% a year, you withdraw 4%, then you have 3% on top that your account is growing by, which allows you down the road to give yourself what is essentially a raise that helps combat inflation. Cost of living increases if you've ever received that raise wherever you're working. So you're not withdrawing any of the actual money of the million you contributed for this hypothetical. You are surviving off of your growth, which is why the faster you contribute to it, the more it grows faster. And once you hit your goal, then you can retire and withdraw safely the amount that you've determined you need to. So the other question would be, how do you know you have enough for the remainder of your life? Well, your retirement depends on how you envision it and the needs that you feel you have, which is based off of the nest egg, as it's called, that you build over your life through your career. In my example that we're walking through now, I'm saying 40,000 is enough for you to satisfy your needs, your wants, and plan for any emergencies in any given year. So $1 million would net you a 7% growth on average per year, which equals $70,000. You want to continue to grow that account to combat inflation. And once that 3% that you're trimming off to combat that, that's $30,000 going back in to your investments so it can grow more. You have $40,000 left over to live off of. And then the next year, 4% will be slightly higher because you invested $30,000, which helps grow your account. So really, it comes down to you deciding what you believe you need to live off of. An easy way to build off of this example, if you only needed to live off of $20,000 a year, then $500,000 is your goal. If you wanted a more lavish retirement, maybe $2 million, because then you'd have $80,000 a year to live off of. You could go higher, you could go lower. And that's where we get into the descriptors of different types of FIRE. Financial independence, retire early, that acronym I keep using. There is lean FIRE, which might be more like that 500,000, which would net you 20,000 per year. There is also the fat FIRE, which is more of like a $5 million retirement goal, which is going to net you 200,000 a year. And obviously all the growth that offers too. There are other forms of FIRE called barista FIRE, which is basically kind of a soft retirement where you are planning on getting away from the full-time workload that you deal with now. Maybe it's in that $500,000 range or somewhere in there, but basically you would retire from the career that you have led. And as the title implies, you would take on the position of some sort of retail or some 2-day-a-week kind of job that gives you access to a cheaper healthcare option that's better than government market healthcare. And that represents the barista FIRE lifestyle. It's kind of similar to what my wife and I are thinking of, although we're not necessarily going to be employed by others. She would continue working from home. She loves making art, so of course she wants to keep that going on. We're going to be homesteading. I want to take food to the market and sell it and explore my own creative endeavors. And those would net us additional income to our early retirement, which we're calling a soft retirement, kind of like barista FIRE, but it's not for the benefit of health benefits. And there's other forms of FIRE as well, not just these ones. We'll dive into all the ones that I know of and all the ones I discover along the way and explain what those mean and hopefully get some examples of those to share with you. So then how do you calculate how much you need for retirement? Well, this kind of goes into that 4% rule. It's a safe rule that has been used since, I believe, the 1920s. And what it tells us is that to safely live off of your retirement accounts, you can withdraw 4% because you know that on average it'll grow 7%. 3% is a typical cost of living increase that you might see from an employer because it combats the increase of groceries, gas, utilities, and inflation. Doesn't always combat that, but typically it does. So if you are going to grow 7% a year, you can pull out 4% to live off of and 3% to combat those inflationary items. So for you, ask yourself, how modest can I live? How lavish do I want to live? What are my goals in retirement? What do I want to do? What do I want my money to do for me in retirement? Do I want to just lead a simple life? Maybe do some light traveling? Do I want to travel all the time? Do I want to be able to buy a new car every 3 years? Those are going to dictate what kind of financial independence you're looking for. If it's more, then you might be interested in a fat fire style. Like I said earlier, the $5 million would net you $200,000 a year. That's a lot of money. I personally don't need that. My wife and I have acknowledged that that is not what we're looking for. It would be great, of course, but that would push our goal of retirement out way further than we would want to deal with. If you're looking for a simpler life, maybe with combination of a part-time job, just to free up your time from the job you're leading now, then the barista fire might be more of the opportunity for you, where you get the cheaper health benefits and some income on the side. Or you could do what my wife and I are doing, which is kind of like the barista fire, more of a soft fire approach, where we know we're going to have work on the side that we want to do, that we enjoy doing, that are kind of hobbies, and then you know that that's all you need. Then by that, you can dictate that you need a lower fire number than, say, somebody who's looking for that lavish life. So ultimately, it comes down to just understanding that basic math with that 4% rule in mind. Look at a few different numbers that you can imagine. Easiest hypothetical, $1 million. Imagine if you hit $1 million on a calculator times 1 million by 0.04, which would give you 4%, $40,000. Is that what you think it looks like for you? If so, then there you go. If not, then increase 1 million to 1.5 or decrease it to 750,000. And then you get an idea of what range you're looking for as a retirement goal. So with all these factors in mind, these questions that we ask about retirement, I hope it gives you some answers as to how you can approach this mindset. It's not impossible. It just takes some basic understanding of what it looks like for your future so that you can plan today. And then by the time you understand it, you can actually use a lot of online calculators. I'll link some in the show notes below. And you can take all of those factors into consideration and get yourself a realistic timeline for when you will fire. Things change all the time. You never know when you're going to have a big life-changing moment, like maybe a child you didn't necessarily plan for, a little surprise, or maybe some sort of emergency. Things throw plans off the track all the time. And when that happens, you adjust. You either adjust how much further out you have before you can retire, or you adjust some lifestyle choices and you pull back on some of them to catch back up to where you were. But more important than anything is getting started. You want to be contributing to these retirement accounts, your 401k, IRA, ETFs, index funds, and there's a lot of other options out there, but you want to start getting invested into those. Before all that, though, we're going to work on getting out of debt, which is a long road for a lot of people, but it's just one of the hurdles that you have to get over. My wife and I went through it. Everyone goes through it. So in the next episode, I want to talk about that, about how to look at your debt differently, maybe look at your current choices that you're making with your money now and redirect them towards your debt so you can get that all out of the way a lot faster than how long it's taking now. And also, I'm going to show you some of the math behind why you want to do that sooner than later. Because when a bank sells you on a loan or a credit card or something, they give you this interest rate, but it's not as simple as that interest rate on your payments that you might think it is. So we're going to talk about that stuff in the next episode, and we're going to get into how you should approach that mountain before you so that you can start riding your way down to retirement on the other side. Thank you for listening to Frugal Noodle. Be sure to follow the podcast wherever you listen so you get episodes as they come out. I am also on TikTok and Instagram. The music in this episode was produced by CARBS. Links are in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.